Good morning, everyone. Hope you're all excited to start your day with us. I'll be your room host for today. My name is Patrick, and a couple of pointers before we get going. So these are the exits. There's an emergency exit here, 2 emergencies exit this way as well. And please remember to silence your phones and download the app. We appreciate your feedback at the end of every session you'll be attending. The sessions will be recorded, and they will be available after the summit. That's mainly it. We're going to get going with the first session for today, Transforming Research in Collaboration with Funding Agencies. And please welcome on stage Sanjay Paddy.
So thank you so much. So I'll talk about what we are doing in AWS in collaboration with funding agencies like National Institute of Health or National Science Foundation. So I'll give a little bit brief introduction about a few of the research we are trying to do that really changes the way we look at the science is done. So next slide. Okay, sorry about. So the next speaker is Andrea. Andrea C is the CIO and CTO of National Institute of Health. She'll be talking about transforming research at the NIH. And Chetan, he's the senior advisor in the National Science Foundation, and he's one of the co-chair of what we call harnessing the data revolution. This is one of the top 10 big ideas from National Science Foundation, and under that area, there are several elements which are extremely beneficial for the research. So in National Institute of Health, as you know, this BD2K program, Big Data to Knowledge program, it really started in around 2013. The phase 1 just ended, and phase 2 is going on. Under this scheme, the researchers get, one of the first time, the access to use cloud platform via their proposals, solicitations. And right now, it's in the phase of phase 2, where researchers are trying to use tools and technologies, digital identifiers, and so on and so forth, in order to really do research using the digital platform. They also worked on, and we're really proud to host many of the studies there. These are some of it. And details you can find in our AWS Research and Technical Computing page. We are extremely proud to support one of this initiative, Kids First. Generally, this was traditionally not so well funded, but we have several analytics on them really transform the research. They develop a data-driven platform that integrates large amount of genomics and clinical data from different disease points. It empowers the collaborative discovery for engagement and necessary partnership. It enables a rapid translation to personalized treatment. These are a couple of things this particular study is doing. Details, as I said, you can see in that particular web page. With National Science Foundation, Chetan will talk about how the harnessing data revolution happens, but we started working on something called Big Data Program. That was last year in a cafe when the speaker and myself, we sat down and tried to think how one can inherit the technological advantages that cloud provides, right? I mean, it's not about how this thing is done, but it's about the algorithms or the platform that transforms the research. So under that scheme, NSF invested roughly about $26.5 million in addition to the cloud credits to really do the big data research, and that is going on for next 3 to 4 years. And it's an annual program. And I'm really pleased to see that how our customer loves it. I mean, out of 8 awards total, and it's selected by National Science Foundation, 5 of them are using AWS. Details can be found in this particular link. And this just came up in Forbes magazine and a few other places. These are some of the studies we are doing. For example, detecting financial market manipulation. This is a big step. It really needs large amounts of data, analytics on top of them, and many times in a real time. We are studying, for example, scalable and interpretable machine learning, that bridging the gap between data-driven modeling. We are studying taming big networking by embedding. I mean, we live in a network age, right? There are a huge number of information. Anything somebody talks about or tells about, he becomes a part of a network, right? When somebody tweets, there are followers. And then you become a part of the network. How do you tame that? Or what are the weightage functions you can do such that you can understand the dynamics of it? That's one of the studies. We also study domain adaptation approach for classifying crisis data management on social media. Imagine there is a crisis. What is the best way at a real time, or what are the supervised or unsupervised learning we can do such that we can use those information to transmit information that, okay, there is a wildfire in California, or something like that, right? So those kind of research we are trying to do with the help of NSF. Distributed semi-supervised training for deep models. Most of us, as you know, any of the study we do depends on the labeling of the data, right? If it's not labeled, it's hard to know. But there are classes of unlabeled data, and one can use those information in order to train it such that it's a semi-supervised model, such that it's not the translation you're doing, but understanding of a content. In this example, it's a video understanding, right? So that's one of the studies we are doing. So one of the final statement, Jim couldn't be here, but in his statement, in today's era of data-driven science and engineering, they're really pleased to work with AWS Research via the NSF Big Data program to provide cloud resources to the nation's researchers to foster and accelerate discovery and innovation. With that, thank you so much. I'll give it to Andrea.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. So I am delighted to have the opportunity to talk with you a little bit about some incredibly exciting things that are happening at the National Institutes of Health and also in the biomedical research field writ large in our country. For those of you who are not familiar with the National Institutes of Health, it is located in Bethesda, Maryland. It is actually a collection of 27 different institutes and centers that each have their own appropriation, that are focused on particular areas of disease or health or organs or body parts, as I like to say, and do the investment in research both through an intramural research program. We have about 10,000 researchers, principal investigators, and researchers on our campus. We have about 110 facilities that are full of labs, wet and dry and computational labs. We have the clinical center, which is the world's largest clinical research hospital. Patients that come there are often, we are their last hope, and we see tens of thousands of patients through there each year at no cost to the patient. They participate in clinical trials that are specific to their particular health issue. We support, our budget is about $35 to $37 billion. One of the wonderful things is NIH generally receives strong and consistent political support given our mission of health and discovery and the reduction of disease. With that money, about 85% of that goes to fund what we refer to as extramural research, which is research that's performed in the 2,500 academic and research institutions around our country, in some cases around the world, as well as the leading medical centers. We support each year about 300,000 researchers. And these are everything from individual investigator awards in particular areas of basic research, all the way to complex, large-scale programs and centers. And so the return is incredible in terms of the return on our economy. The estimate by independent studies is that based on the research dollars, your tax dollars that's going into this research, it returns about $60 billion into the economy. But the most important thing is what it does for health. So because this is, my goal today is to make this a little personal for you as to why what I'm going to talk about matters. So Heart disease. How many people in the audience have had a loved one affected by heart disease? If you would raise your hand, thank you. 36% decline over the last 15 years because of the research that's done here. Stroke. Anyone have family members affected by stroke? That has reduced more than 78% since 1950 because of the research and therapeutics that are done. It is still the 5th leading cause of death. But one of the most exciting advancements we have recently found is that if you get treatment between 16 and 24 hours, your chance of survival is extremely high. And so we're affecting the standards of care for this very important activity. Cancer still remains one of the leading causes, although heart is the leading issue. Lung cancer still is the leading killer, but we are reducing cancer rates at about 1% a year. Anyone involved with family members that have Alzheimer's? Yeah, my mother actually died with Alzheimer's. Every 66 seconds, someone is diagnosed with Alzheimer's in our country. So in the time I've been talking, at least 1 or 2 people have been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. It is something that we have got to determine how to better identify, diagnose, and treat. 1 in 3 seniors die with Alzheimer's today. Opioid, this is a national public health crisis. There are more than 2 million people addicted to opioids, and more than 25 million people report being in extreme pain every day of their life. So we can't just treat the opioid side of it. We also have to find other ways to deal with pain issues for the 25 million people that are surviving each day with those constraints. Influenza, still one of the leading causes of death. We think we are within sight of being able to have better vaccines and treatments for that. AIDS. Today, if you are diagnosed with AIDS, you will likely die of old age. And when I was in my 20s, it was a death sentence for many people. So this is why what I'm going to talk to you about is so important, because it is literally going to affect your health, the health of the people that you love, your friends and family, and your children and grandchildren. So I joined NIH about 7 years ago, and I can't say it was an incredibly exciting time to come to NIH because we were just at the cusp of this, what we call the big data wave, right? We were beginning to see, because of the genomic work that had been done and the declining cost of genomic sequencing machines, we were seeing these huge generations, ability to generate huge data sets of data. Largely in the genomic area, but also in a whole range of other omics, proteomics, microbiomics, et cetera. Imaging data was becoming far more accessible. This was over the last few years. We've seen the successful adoption of electronic health records. That data had never been previously available. And we've always had clinical data, but we didn't have good ways to look across clinical trials and access data that was collected at different times for different purposes. And equally important is our environmental data. We're certainly appreciating more and more your own environmental considerations and constraints and the effect that it plays on health. So NIH really has been undertaking a journey in this, what I call data science or big data space. And it is one that is closely aligned with the advances in technology that we have also watched over the last number of years. And so we did a number of events. We recruited an associate administrator for data science, Dr. Phil Bourne, who helped us for several years in establishing our vision and direction in this space. We funded a big data to knowledge program at about $100 million, largely in research in the data science space. We invested heavily in our infrastructure at our campus. 100 gigabit distributed wide area network, a supercomputer that now is ranked number 66 in the world and the largest dedicated to biomedical research. We also began forming a number of partnerships with pharma, other commercial partners, et cetera, because we started to realize that the demands, we knew the wave was coming, but it came faster than we were expecting. And we knew that we needed to look at different ways of doing business, different ways of how we support and address these large, rich data sets and the computational tools that we now have at our availability. And so one of the things that we've most recently done is kind of paused in our journey and looked at where do we need to go strategically. So we just released our data science, a strategic plan for data science. I would encourage you to take a look at that. But some of the elements of this are very much in the, reflect our changing thinking, and that we are looking to literally change the way in which we do research with these data-intensive programs. Looking at what kind of ecosystem and infrastructure we need to have in place across our nation. How can we better partner with companies like AWS and other cloud providers, software providers, developers, engineers, niche products, data analytic tools, as opposed to turning always to the academic and research community? How can we bridge the gap between finding, making it accessible, the information accessible, interoperable across the variety of platforms and tools that we use, and reusable and sustainable? NIH invests about $1 billion a year on our campus information technology infrastructure, and about $650 million a year in supporting and sustaining these data-intensive technology, computationally intensive programs. So our strategic plan really speaks to the things that we need to do in that space over the next few years, including development of a workforce. We train, if you're in the biomedical field, you likely have been supported at some point in your career by NIH, either a fellowship, internship, or training program. And so we train a tremendous amount of people in our workforce and in the national workforce. And so how can we help bridge through curricula support, through training programs and platforms like AWS to help the current and next generation researchers be able to use these tools better? So just a little bit of context for this. AWS was our first journey into the cloud with the 1,000 Genomes Project. And this was a map of all the human genome variations. We studied 25 populations across the world: African, European, Mixed American, East and South Asian, and mapped 2,500 human genomes and their variation. What's interesting is this built on, of course, the Human Genome Project, which we just celebrated 15 years anniversary of that. That was where we first were able to complete the mapping of all the genes of human beings. So think about that. That was just 15 years ago. And it has literally changed the way we think about science, biomedical science, and disease. And we worked with AWS to this was back in the day, and so we struggled with how to get these very large data sets into cloud environments, how to structure them, things that now are quite easy with the advances that have been made. But AWS was a key partner with us on this first foray into the cloud. We also have, AWS supports and makes publicly accessible the Cancer Genome Atlas, which is an important resource. It has 200 forms of cancer that are caused by errors in DNA. And it maps the key genomic changes in 33 types of those cancers, the most leading ones, different tumor types, affecting 11,000 people and 1,000 studies. we are finding this ability to do genetic makeups of the tumors and our ability to bring more precise treatment and therapeutics based on the genetic makeup of your tumor to have quite positive outcomes. We're seeing some amazing results with people with certain types of lung cancer tumors, as well as other forms of cancer. And so this is a whole new direction. This basic research here has enabled us to really advance some treatments in ways that we would not have expected. And this is supported, again, by AWS. The size and scale of this data we could not continue to maintain in our on-campus or research institutions. This has now evolved as part of the Cancer Moonshot into what we call the Genomic Data Commons data portal. This has TCGA data as well as other data. You can see the types of tumor information and information that we have. We've invested tens of millions of dollars to get this data into cloud platforms, including AWS, and to make this very usable for researchers around the world. So they can bring their data, they can bring their pipeline, they can use the data that we have collected as rich resources, and they can then leave their data and leave their discovery and share their tools. And this is one of our largest data commons activities that we have been working on for several years. AWS is a key partner with us on this, and we are continuing to see amazing outcomes because of this. So this has literally changed the way we think about doing science in these data-intensive programs. Another example supported by AWS is the microbiome. So we've learned over the last few years the importance of microbiomes in your autoimmune diseases, in your overall immunity, overall health. You hear about the leaky gut and the importance that microbiomes plays on diseases of the heart and brain. And so this is an earlier project done by the Allergy and Infectious Disease Institute with our Genomic Institute for making that data accessible, bringing communities together who are studying this, and all supported free of cost here but through NIH. Another big thing that we're starting to go into, again, I've mentioned the precision medicine area. One key example is the All of Us program. This is going to be a 1 million cohort study. We just did a national launch on this a couple of months ago. We are looking for participants, very diverse, where you will contribute your blood, other samples, your genomic data, your environmental data, your scanner data. And we will do this across 1 million people from all parts of the country and from all backgrounds and bring open this in easy ways to researchers who will then be able to transverse and do analysis across these rich data sets. There are about 50 large cohort studies like this in the world. Right now we're in the position where we can gather information about those in a systemic way by spreadsheets. So think what we can do when we can tap in and unite the data through things like cloud capabilities and extensible compute algorithms and analytic programs around the world with that kind of diversity of community. And that's something that we see the future in the future. We also have a very large program called the NIH Data Commons, trying to really look at how these are not easy things to do, right? When you transgress, go across data types, types of studies, clinical trials versus EHR data versus imaging data, when you go across different environments and platforms, be it a local university environment, a cloud environment, whatever. And so we are starting with 3 key, very important data sets for us, and really looking at how do we really do this? How do we do this in an interoperable way? What kind of standards do we need? What kind of, what's the middleware need to look like that we don't need to repeat in every case? How do we make this easy for the novice researcher all the way to the extreme bioinformaticist to be able to really maximize the value of this data? And so it is really, we are really changing the way we think about how we do science in this new technology-enabled big data world. And we could not have done it without partners like AWS. We are working to move these large data sets into cloud environments to lower the price point and the gate for researchers to be able to then get to that data, to make it easy for them to find it, to use it, to bring their tools, bring their data, and really change the way in which we do research so that we can expedite discovery in these diseases and areas of health that are so critical to all of us in so many ways. And so the thing I would ask you to think about as I end here is it's really what we're finding more and more is this takes such a cohesive set of disciplines and expertise. The bench scientist still has their role in our biomedical. We are so committed to basic science, but these data-intensive programs are where we think we will really accelerate the delivery of cures and better therapeutic treatments. And so as for the future, your task is not to foresee it, but to enable it. So you are the folks who are going to make this happen for us. We are counting on AWS. We are counting on our other commercial partners. We are counting on our research partners to actually enable how to do this. We're in an experiential journey. We're going to continue this journey. We're looking for innovative ideas, innovative ways to deal with these very complex cultural and technology and science challenges. One of the things, I'll do a quick plug, we are looking for a chief data strategist at NIH, and I thought what better audience to announce this. And I am one of the chairs of the search committee, so if you are interested in talking about the potential of that position, I would be delighted to talk to you, or if you know of people, we're looking for a senior executive who will help us continue to craft and build this world of big data science. And so thank you very much.
Right. Good morning. I'm Chetan R from the National Science Foundation, and so I'm going to tell you a little bit. Actually, the previous talk and Sanjay's introduction was a great setup for what I want to talk about, which is essentially sort of the data initiative. In fact, all of the activities related to data science that the National Science Foundation is looking at. And actually, my co-presenter who's not here today, he's at another meeting, is Arvind Gyanchandani, who's the acting assistant director for the Computer Science Directorate. And since you heard the introduction to NIH from Dorothy, I couldn't resist saying a little bit more about NSF. I don't have a particular slide about NSF, but just to give you the background, the National Science Foundation, which is located in Alexandria, you can hop on the yellow line and get there directly, is the nation's agency for basic science research, right? So, and it covers, the basic science that NSF does covers all areas of science except biomedicine. So any health and disease-related research is at NIH, but really everything else falls under the purview of NSF as far as research is concerned. It's about an $8 billion agency, and you heard a lot of the things that have come out of NSF, so I wanted to give some examples of things out of NIH. So want to give some examples of things out of NSF. And just from a computer science point of view, since I'm from the computer science directorate, and there'll be similar, any number of similar stories from other directorates. A lot of the initial growth of the internet was funded by NSF, right? So ARPANET was created by DARPA, but then NSFNet was created by the NSF, and that whole explosion, especially reaching out of the internet into all the university campuses, was an NSF thing. Google, the founders of Google were graduate students on an NSF digital library project, and a lot of the ideas they learned about search and looking for information, et cetera, from the digital library program that NSF had at that time clearly influenced a lot of what they did at Google. If you look at another probably $10 billion industry, relational databases, a lot of research, again, some products, initial research was done out of IBM, but there was a lot of research in academia that helped with things like query optimization, transaction processing, failover recovery, all the things that we now take for granted when you're just doing your daily life came out of NSF. Most recently, many of you may be familiar with this software called Spark that's now used in data analytics. That came out of a project that we funded called the AMP Lab at UC Berkeley, which spun out this company called Databricks that now supports Spark. And now here we are talking about AI and machine learning. And in fact, the reason Erwin, whom I mentioned is an acting assistant director, is my real boss, the actual assistant director at NSF, is currently on assignment to the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy as the assistant director for AI ML and helping the administration sort of do strategic investments in the next coming years in that area. So the NSF clearly is involved in, even though it's sort of doing basic research, you can see that there is a lot of stuff that comes out of this basic research that really does impact us. So one of the sort of exciting things, I think, at NSF is to always be thinking about what will the future look like. Now, we cannot predict it, but we want to sort of broadly go in directions that hopefully we are doing a coverage of where things are going. So the thing I'm going to talk about today, this notion of NSF big ideas came up last year. The NSF director, Dr. Franz Cordova, had a sort of exercise within NSF to try and surface some of the big directions for research investments in the next 5 to 10 years. There are multiple here. I won't go into all of them, but the very first one is what we call harnessing the data revolution, HDR. That's the one I'm going to talk about. And that's really, as I said, our sort of entree into this whole new, what we think of as, what we believe is this new discipline of data science. There's also another big idea related to the future of work. So with all these AI, ML, autonomous systems, et cetera, how is the workplace changing? How should we train people? You heard some of the sort of flavors of these issues, even from the NIH presentation. There are others related to navigating the new Arctic, the major changes that are going on in that area, and how do we observe that environment, and how do we make predictive predictions about where things are going there. New ways to discover what's happening in the universe, so that's the windows on the universe, big idea. Quantum leap, so this could be the next big technology after post-Moore's law, as we are running out of steam on our current technology. Can we investigate what quantum computers look like, and then from a computer science point of view, what does the software have to look like? How do algorithms get designed on those platforms, and so on? And finally, understanding the rules of life, which in a way is you can think of it as the theoretical foundations of the medical issues that come about, right? So understanding the genome to phenome. So these are the set of big ideas. There's another one that we call the process big idea. I'll just mention because you definitely heard that in the previous presentation. And the idea there is this notion of convergence. So we think all of these things listed here and many more complex societal issues, whether you're talking about water or the nexus of food, energy, water systems, or precision digital agriculture, et cetera, we are going into complex domains where not a single domain is not going to be able to solve the problem. You have to have multiple scientific domains coming together along with the technological domain. So you need this deep integration between understanding the technology and understanding the problem to solve the issue at hand. And again, AI machine learning, the hottest word that we all hear, every day you wake up in the morning, it's probably on the radio, somebody is saying it, right? It is all, I'm sure you all know if you're doing that stuff, it's all full of that. You don't do AI ML techniques until you really understand what's going on in the domain, and if you deploy something, you need to understand what's the implications of it. So that's our notion of convergence, and you'll see that everywhere in all the big ideas, and it's certainly here in the data science big idea. So as I said, our harnessing the data revolution, what we call HDR, is really about looking at fundamental research in data science and engineering. Okay, and also a big part of that is, certainly one part of that is the what we call cyber infrastructure, the infrastructure that enables that to happen. This is where cloud computing is a big aspect of it, and that's where AWS, for example, would be a big partner for us. But another big one is education and training. And you probably have seen that as well. This is not just, well, we are certainly concerned about how do you educate the next generation of kids that are coming along, everything from K through 12 to undergrad and beyond. But what about the current workforce? The rate at which technology is changing, how do we ensure that our own workforce keeps up with it? And it's not just the workforce in industry, the same issues are even in academia. Professors in different disciplines want to catch up with what's going on in, say, machine learning. So I might be a biologist, but I want to know the latest techniques so that because I have this data deluge that you heard about, so that I can deal better with the data that I have. So it's a tough challenge, right? I mean, we are now talking about imagining where data science is going to go. We are talking about all these domains that are being impacted by data. How do we create research programs at NSF that begin to help with this problem? So of course, we had a lot of meetings and retreats, et cetera, to think about this. And I think what we settled down on are these 5 themes that you see being represented here. We identified that there are research areas that need to be explored. And the reason, by the way, this is tough is you want to be able to, as a new research initiative, you want to be able to invest in things that help a broad range of problems, or a broad range of what we call domains, right? The science and engineering domains, and not just something that's only for a specific problem. So that's kind of the challenge. So we came up with a bunch of research ideas that can be pursued here. And then, as I mentioned the need for cyber infrastructure, cloud being a big aspect of that, and then the education and training. And that's what you're seeing here. So on the research side, these 3 circles are, one is to investigate in collaboration. When I say collaboration, again, I'm the computer scientist. So think of it as computer scientists, mathematicians, statisticians working together with scientists in other domains, whether it's biology, geoscience, physics, material science, astronomy, et cetera, to say, okay, what are these data-intensive challenges that you folks are facing? And how can we design algorithms, systems, et cetera, jointly, this notion of convergence, to solve these problems? So that's one sort of thrust for research is understanding what are the data-intensive research issues in these disciplines. And of course, medicine would be one of them, one of these areas. And then trying to say, can we come up with some generalizations that we can then pursue as research thrusts? Underlying those things, as I mentioned, for us, data science is this emerging discipline. So then we also want to understand what are the foundations of data science that make data science different from computer science alone, or mathematics alone, or statistics alone. So this intersection of CS, math, and stats leading towards the foundations of data science. And remember, when I say data science, it's not just machine learning, as you may have heard. And certainly in many meetings, people say machine learning is probably, what, 15, maybe at most 20% of the problem. The real problem is the data collection, the data cleaning, understanding the data, and really knowing what the data means before you can apply all your fancy algorithms on that data. So what are the theoretical foundations for all of that? Okay, not just for the machine learning. But that also includes things like transparency, interpretability, ethics, and all of those issues, fairness. And then what are the systems and algorithms? You can think of it broadly as the sort of software and the conceptual infrastructure that would support this. Okay. Now, I won't go into the details of these slides, but this is just to say that as we were discussing these, we surfaced NSF has about 7 different directorates that span all of these science and engineering areas that I mentioned. And so each of these directorates was asked to sort of think of what are the big problems in your discipline that you foresee where you're going to be seeing big data challenges. So, space weather prediction is one where the geosciences and astronomy, physical science folks are very interested. I already mentioned this notion of multi-messenger astrophysics, detecting signals of very different kinds that are coming to us that allow us to understand sort of evolution of the universe. Issues of integrating ecological data and geoscience data to understand maybe ecosystem behavior at a large scale, not just regional, but continental scale, and so on and so forth. Okay. And the idea we have here is to maybe create this, what we are thinking of as HDR institutes, where an institute is the place where this convergence happens. Multiple science comes together with technologies and infrastructure. And the challenge, and this is very current, these are ongoing discussions, what you're hearing are fresh sort of things. And what we are trying to do is look at all these science and engineering problems, take a step back and say, okay, what's really going on under the covers here as far as data science is concerned? So one thing that keeps coming up is real-time data. So real-time analytics, real-time decision making, and so on. Another thing that comes up is integration of data across scales, right? This could be from molecular scales to ecosystem scales or any of those kind of things, and also integration of extremely multimodal kinds of data, structured data, imagery, video, text, and so on and so forth. Okay. And these institutes that we are thinking about need to link to the foundational aspects. So as you're looking at practical problems, you might say, gee, there's a really naughty problem here that we need some theory to advance. And so then you go to the foundational folks and say, can you guys tackle this at a theoretical level? We also then want to identify what are the systems and algorithms that need to be in place, and then what's the education and training that should come out of this so that we can train the next generation. So again, in some sense, notion of convergence there. I won't say much about any of these. You can Google any of these terms here, like if you Google NSF tripods, you'll see a lot of information. But the program that we already started on the foundations is this tripod stands for Transdisciplinary Research in the Principles of Data Science. And it's transdisciplinary, and the tri implying computer science, statistics, and math coming together to identify what are the foundational notions. The other one, as I said, is as we look at all of these problems, we are trying to take a step back and say, it's the equivalent of the internet that we created in the past, or the web, or those kind of things, to say what would be the equivalent kind of infrastructural capabilities that we could do research in and create today that would help data science going forward. And one notion is this open knowledge network, which is essentially a semantic information infrastructure. So you can think of it as if you think of the internet as sort of networking infrastructure that allows many computers to connect together, the open knowledge network is the semantic infrastructure that allows multiple data types to be connected together. There's also the notion of sharing models, maybe machine learning models, but all sorts of other data intensive and maybe even physical and science models, so that people can reproduce results. So if you created a result and created a model, you had a data set, I could take that and reproduce that result, or maybe I could take that and reuse it. I could adjust it for my environment. So there's this notion of creating, you heard about data commons, where data are shared, and the next level up really is model commons, where the model is a first order object, and models are shared, and you can basically sort of do reasoning and other kinds of operations, query, discovery, et cetera, at the model level. I mentioned about workforce education and workforce development. I won't go into the details, but we certainly hear from many of our colleagues, and I think you sort of saw some of that even in the NIH presentation, the need for these notion of boot camps and getting the current generation of scientists, researchers, et cetera, trained in all the latest, greatest things going on. And if you paid attention to any of this stuff, the change is just happening extremely rapidly. And I don't see that slowing for at least next 5 to 10 years. So we need to be able to keep up with it. And what are the strategies for doing that? One of the things there, as we see the emergence of data science as a discipline, many universities are rolling out undergraduate programs, graduate programs. There are many data scientists who want to work in the sort of with real world problems. There's this notion of data science for social good and help with practical situations. What we see in data science is you really cannot learn data science unless you really do dirty your hands with the data. So sitting in the classroom and learning is a small part of it. And you have to do it in the context. There are a lot of decisions made when you collect data, when you clean data, when you analyze data that are actually made in the context. And you don't really understand all of that unless you're sitting there in the context. So there's an opportunity here we find to connect people who want to learn about data science or might actually have certain skills and want to improve on their skills with practical problems. And the opportunity also is that you may know this already, but there's a lot of data out there that's either underutilized or unused. And how do we connect the talent and the new people coming out who are trained in data science with the need that's out there? So this is the idea of a data science score, similar to an AmeriCorps or like even a Peace Score, which allows these people who are interested in helping and learning with practical problems. Let's see. I think I should skip forward. So just say very quickly about, Sanjay already mentioned this. So our relationship with the cloud providers started last year in our big data program. Sanjay mentioned that this year we awarded about $26 million of new grants. Our big data PI meeting is going on right now. In fact, that's where I need to go right after this in Weston at Alexandria. And the program basically was if you received a grant from NSF, you would also receive credits on the cloud. And we got last year 3 cloud providers, Amazon, Azure, and Google, to sign on, each providing $3 million, up to $3 million, so up to $9 million of credits that our research community could use. And this year we had IBM joining the program. The thing I want to say here is the reason this is a very exciting program for us is a couple of things. The clouds are really now the environment where you can get the latest and greatest. If you want the latest GPUs, TPUs, latest computing capabilities, they're right there in the cloud. You can get them faster in the cloud than you can go and write a purchase order, get grants from your university, and order a piece of hardware, install it, and try to use it, right? So there's on-demand, instant access to the latest hardware, which is a big, big advantage for our research community. Secondly, I'm not going to go into the details of these projects. You already heard about some of these. But in a way, this is very much a democratizing influence. So you don't have to be at a Berkeley or a Michigan. Actually, some of the awardees here are from Berkeley and Michigan, or from UC San Diego, where I happen to be from, where there's a supercomputer center. You can be from Kansas State. You can be from University of Central Florida. I think we have one here. Or even any other institutions that doesn't have on-campus abilities, but you'll be as competitive. So the only thing that matters is how cool your idea is, and you can compete now on your ideas rather than saying, I have access to this infrastructure. So I think I'll just stop with that.